Well, here we are on Cinco de Mayo, which has had the audacity to land on Taco Tuesday, only to be ruined by a virus named after a Mexican beer. What has this taught us today, cats and kitties? It's taught us that when things throw us a curveball, the only way to really successfully navigate them is with humor. And of course I didn't come up with that, but I'm using it. Yes, sirree. Nihil est sub solum nest, nothing new under the sun. Oh, that was some bad Latin. Fortunately, it's a dead language and I have very few people to apologize for that. This is the last. In the last fable book, there were 2 fable books and we have burned through them. But fear not, for tonight we transition. We do not end, we adapt. Ha ha. Yes, sirree. Think we're messing around. Hope I didn't have anything really important on that note. So tonight we have Racoon, Unmasked. Rick Racoon stomped across his living room. He was looking for his favorite book, but he couldn't find it. Rick stomped over to his older sister and growled, "Find my book!" Ugh, I looked everywhere and can't find it. His sister Lydia shrugged her shoulders and asked, "Where's the last place you had it?" Rick stamped his foot, kicked a nearby chair. "Well, if I knew that, I'd have found it by now. I don't know." Lydia sighed. Her little brother was always having this sort of angry fit over his problems. While he was normally a very sweet-natured and kind little raccoon, he never asked politely for help because he was so angry and frustrated over not being able to find or fix or do whatever it was that he wanted to do. Lydia tried again. "Take a moment and think about where you were when you were reading that book," she said. "Look, we can make a mystery game out of it. Picture in your mind where you were sitting or what time of day it was. Those are the clues, and then we can try and solve the mystery." Instead of trying the game his sister suggested, Rick completely lost his temper and he began to shout and cry all at once. As a matter of fact, he cried so hard that Lydia just couldn't even make out what he was saying. This made Rick more frustrated and he stomped away out the front door. He slammed the door as hard as he could behind him. The little raccoon kicked at the dirt, threw rocks, cried and cried until he finally calmed down enough to go back inside. When he went back inside, his sister had gone to her room to play alone, and Rick saw her book sitting on a little table, and he decided it was easier to take her book and read it than it was to look for his own book. Also, he thought it would be a good idea to get back at her. In the meantime, their mother found Rick's book under his reading chair, but still, he didn't give Lydia's book back. "Serves her right for not helping me," he said to himself. The next day, when his sister was searching for her book and asked him if he'd seen it, he said in a high, squeaky voice that pretended to be like Lydia's, "Where's the last place that you had it?" Lydia narrowed her eyes at him, and her tail bristled into a large puff. "Did you take my book?" she asked. "Why would I want your old book?" he said. "Just a silly girl book." A few days later, Rick could not find his favorite squeaky toy to sleep with, and he began to stomp and growl as usual. He stomped up to his mother and began to cry and shout. "Find my toy for me," he shouted at his mother. His mother shook her head and said, "Enough shouting. Time to take responsibility for your own things. I will help you look, but you're old enough to start keeping track of your things yourself. Also, You're not allowed to be rude. Rick folded his arms, turned his back on his mother with an angry sound. Then he stomped away. His mother followed him, and when she caught up with him, she sent him to his room to sit and think about how to be kinder. But Rick couldn't think about being nice. He was too angry. All Rick could think about was how he could make his mother as unhappy as she made him by sending him to his room. Revenge. Once he was allowed out, he sneaked into her room and stole her favorite silver fur brush and hid it away under his bed, along with his sister's book. Then he was just so exhausted by his anger that he crawled into his bed and he fell into a very deep sleep. In his dreams, he met a strange-looking raccoon. It didn't look like any raccoon he knew. It didn't wear a mask of black fur that all the other raccoons wore. Its face was just plain brown. In his dream, Rick was in his room, sitting on his bed. He was reading his sister's book. He was even holding his mother's brush in his lap. The raccoon came up to Rick and said, I'm Swiper, the very first raccoon that ever was. I've come to visit you. His dream was so real that he felt like he really was sitting on his bed talking to this strange creature. Go away, Rick said. I'm tired. I want to sleep, not talk to some weird thing. Where's your mask anyway? Swiper looked the little raccoon up and down, and then he said, better to ask why you have a mask. Rick considered this. Well, it's just there, he said. But because he didn't know the answer and wished that he did, Rick began to stomp and cry. Swiper waited until the young raccoon finished his tirade. No, it's not just there, Swiper said. It is there because of me and my angry taking ways. Swiper sat beside Rick and told his story. When I was young and angry, I'd steal things or smash things that belonged to other people. I'd shout at those that I asked for help, Swiper said. I do those things because I was angry at myself for not being able to do something. When I was very young, everyone took care of me and found my things and fixed my problems for me, he explained. But then I grew, and it was time for me to begin to think and do for myself. He continued, I wanted everything I did to be perfect, and if it was not, I'd become angry. I didn't want to be wrong. I wanted to be perfect because I thought my older brothers and sisters and my parents were perfect. Rick began to listen and think very hard at these words. He could see that he had felt and done these same things. Well, everything seemed to be easy for them, Swiper said, so I figured they could just do everything for me. Now, Rick was getting very upset because he thought these same things. Well, but it is easier for them, he cried. Everything's easy for them. They can reach things that I can't reach, and they can figure things out faster than I, so it's only fair that they do it for me. Swiper laughed. Have you considered that these things were not always easy for them? Perhaps they too struggled and learned for themselves, and that's why they can do things that you cannot. Now, Rick thought hard about this, and it never occurred to him that this might be the case. He just thought his parents and sisters were born knowing everything. And then a mask appeared on Swiper's face. I was given this mask by the creator of all things as a punishment, because I never stopped being angry or rude. I never stopped taking, Swiper said. And he explained that his punishment was also that all raccoons that came after him would wear this mask as a reminder to all creatures why they should not steal or seek revenge on others. Each new generation of raccoons would be born wearing that mask until all stealing and revenge had stopped. Now it's your turn, Rick, Swiper said. You must give back what you took, and you have to begin the mission of teaching others the truth and thereby taking away anger. ending revenge and stealing. Can you? Yeah, suddenly Rick felt very grown up and important. He was being given a mission, and that was quite something. It wasn't an order or a punishment, but it was a mark. That's what the mark was, though. A special mark. Rick stood up. He gathered his things that he'd taken. Okay, I promise, from now on, I'll try to find my own things, and I'll never steal. And I won't try to get back at anyone. Swiper smiled. Well, okay, I'm counting on you to practice what you've learned. No one can do right all the time, but we all must try. Teach others, and maybe someday all the raccoons will be free of the mark. Rick awoke with a start. He looked around for Swiper, but saw only his room. Quick as he could, he grabbed the book and the brush from their hiding place, and he ran down the stairs to his mother and sister to return their things and tell this amazing story. When he was through, they both hugged and kissed him. His mother smiled and winked at his sister and said, "Think we should tell him?" Lydia nodded. Mother said, "When Lydia was small, she too was visited by Swiper for doing just the same things that you did. She learned her lesson, and I suppose now you have too." Rick was shocked. Swiper had visited perfect Lydia? Perfect Lydia really did make mistakes. Well, now he knew it wasn't just a powerful dream, but a powerful truth that he had seen. And so it was that the little raccoon mended his ways and became the next in a long line of dreamers who'd spend their lives teaching other creatures right from wrong and unmasking those who didn't heed Swiper's lesson. That's kind of an evergreen story to end the fable books on. I feel like the mask is that which is systemic in our societies, our cultures, our natures. And I think that we dream that it'll be corrected, all of the wrongs, the prejudices, the hate, the revenge, that we continually have to remember is not the way to go. And the only way, of course, to solve systemic anything is to do it systematically, generationally. So now we transition. Yes, I will continue to write more fables. You've heard 3 brand new ones that weren't in the book, so have no fear. But your girl here has also been a journalist for 30-something years. For the New York Times, the Christian Science Monitor, and others. And I ran across this piece tonight as I was trying to figure out what to transition to. I think I'm going to feather in some of these opinion pieces. This one's from the Christian Science Monitor, and it's from Tuesday, September 13th, 2005. And yet, I believe that you're going to find a parallel. I hope you will. So it's a true story. And it's advice from the last chaplain in New Orleans. I talked to the last remaining police department chaplain in New Orleans this weekend, asking him for advice. The gist of Joe Cull's cell phone sermon from the 2nd District Station on Magazine and Upton Streets in New Orleans was, now that Katrina victims have been led beside still waters, it's time to restore their souls. I sought his advice because I'd begun volunteering at the Red Cross last week here in Norfolk, where nobody ever thought they'd see hundreds of Katrina survivors. The mother of 4 little boys, survivor of Hurricane Isabel, I wanted to help the displaced children sitting in the multi-purpose room while their parents filed paperwork to try and get their lives on track, while bunking with friends or relatives here. Adults were exhausted and empty. Some were angry. Others just swept away in silent tears that wouldn't stop rolling down their cheeks. But they were determined not to fold. The children needed entertaining, but the adults needed something I couldn't pull out of my bag of tricks. So I called a friend in Tennessee, whose brother is a chaplain still in New Orleans. I asked if he'd given her any clue about how to help people. My friend, Edna Kennan, said she thought we could help each other because her brother wanted to talk about the sort of short shrift being given in the press to the uncommonly brave deeds of police officers there. Mr. Coe called me that night, and he said that he'd been out sightseeing. He wanted to tell people about what he'd seen. The city's soul still intact. He was relieved to hear so many people were still soldiering on, even all the way over in Virginia, and he wasn't surprised. Coe is one of 3 chaplains contracted to the police force by the Christian Health Ministries, a part of the McFarland Institute based in New Orleans. The ministry offices were destroyed. All the other chaplains assigned to New Orleans left Friday before the hurricane hit. I'm on my own till the ministry can get back on its feet, explained the chaplain, who spent his waking hours with the police, saving lives and listening to the hopes and fury while ferrying victims to shelters in an unending cycle of rescue and spiritual recovery. His first advice was, don't try too hard. You can't make them feel different, but you can listen. He told the story of an NOPD officer, Troy Lyles, a young mother who sent her children to safety before Katrina hit and remained behind to do her job. But she found herself trapped in her own attic. She sat on a roof for 2 days waiting for a helicopter after helicopter, and none of them stopped for her. He says, then a guy floating by on a door, paddled over and rescued her without having any way to contact her children to know if they had remained safe. Officer Lyles went straight to work alongside Cull and others who'd rescued themselves to save others. At a prayer service one night, she sang a hymn she'd learned in childhood, One Clear Voice in the Dark. Cull said the storm swept away barriers to faith. Now, it used to be that I almost never said a prayer at roll call. Now it's expected. What was an intrusion is now a necessity, a desire, a source of comfort and hope. Asked what he would tell a survivor who said the hurricane has destroyed their faith in God, the chaplain answered, you only get angry with the ones you care about. More of these people need to articulate that kind of feeling. I respect that, and I take it as a sign of their healing. You have to respect someone's space at a time like that and know it's good to let that out because that lets them heal faster. The images of Katrina have been so graphic, there's the urge to shut our eyes. Knowing what I do now, I think that we should close our eyes and see that soul of the matter is what really matters. Let's find ways to give to that wherever we can. Katrina and this story made me think about what we're all collectively going through right now. And it is a soul-wrenching crisis for many, many people. Many people have lost loved ones. I spoke to Karen Parker Chesson, who's a public affairs officer for our Norfolk Police Department. Anybody knows her might want to reach out to her right now. She has lost both of her aunts this week and could not bury them. Had to go through relatives in South Carolina just to get them brought down here so they could be cremated, so that in the future at some point their family can have that closure of a service for them. Meanwhile, there are people who are so pressed, they're so upset, they're so in crisis over the concept of being told to stay at home that they're letting that anger out. They're letting their fear out. And they are in crisis. It's not the same crisis that I'm in. It's not the same crisis that Karen's in. It's not the same crisis that the DiMartino family was in over losing Adolfo. But it's a crisis. And when I read this tonight, I thought, man, it is hard. It is so hard to think of it that way. But maybe that's how we get through their anger. Maybe we need to understand and recognize that whatever it is, these folks are in a crisis, a spiritual, emotional, psychological crisis. And hating on them is only going to hurt us because poison kills the one who carries it. Yep. So if we can get that out of this story tonight, I'll feel like I really did something. So, happy Cinco de Mayo. And I will see you here tomorrow night. And I will just have to surprise you with what direction the stories take. Good night, all.